Hi, Dan.
Hi, Joe.
Welcome. Welcome to the Ultimate Love Letter. Thank you so much for being here. Dan Hendricks, I've been wanting to speak with you. You authored the new release, the Magi Apprentice, that we cannot wait to hear all about. And this is so appropriate right now, not only in everything that we're seeing that's happening in the world, but also right now as we're gearing up for Christmas. So I wanted to jump right into it. Dan, please tell us about your new book.
Well, Magi Apprentice is a historical fiction, ancient historical fiction. It's really the backstory of the wise men in Matthew chapter 2 that visited the child Jesus. And it's something that I've been interested in for a long time. I'm a minister. I've been practicing for about 40 years, and I've studied a concept called the Word in the Stars. And it's about the biblical interpretation of the meaning of the zodiac and how God, in the original intent of understanding the 12 signs of the zodiac, put the understanding of the coming of the Messiah and what he would do. Well, in Matthew chapter 2, there were some men that showed up in Herod's court, and they asked, "Where is he that was born King of the Judeans? For we have seen his star in the eastern sky." And, most people don't really understand what that means. And what I understand today is that these men saw six configurations over a period of about 11 months in the zodiac, especially in the constellation of Leo, that proved to them that the Messiah had come. And it proved to them so big that they got a caravan together and they headed all the way from the Parthian Empire as far as Babylon, the city of Babylon, to the city of Jerusalem, which was a massive undertaking. And they were so convinced of this that they walked right into Herod's court and said, "Where's your king?"
Mm.
And you know how the biblical record goes that he had his scholars look up where the Messiah was supposed to be born, and so it was Bethlehem. So he sent them to Bethlehem, and they were there at the right time, at the right place, because they saw the signs and the stars. And so I've been teaching this stuff for a long time to my people that I pastor and stuff, and I just thought it would be neat to format this in a story, which is fun and entertaining, but also has all the research and all the other things with it that make it so that you can understand that the word was written in the stars to the point that these magi, these people that lived in the east that studied the stars as astronomers, were able to pinpoint from the signs in the zodiac when the Messiah was born and when it was time to go see him.
And I love the level of knowing, right? Like you said, as soon as they arrived to the court, they immediately said, "Where is the
Yeah.
king?" Not even questioning it. Absolutely. Now, in your story, we do know, well, it is fictional. You weaved it
Yeah,
beautifully with a
historical
love
fiction.
story.
Yeah.
Now, might I ask you, why did you take the approach of the perspective of the apprentice rather than a magi?
Well, because I wanted to, I'm an author. I have 8 other books out already, and I understand, how you got to get people into the story. So my path was a coming of age type story, where this young man who chose to be a Parthian cavalry officer went to the Parthian military academy and had just graduated, had a chance encounter with a dying magi who charged him with a mission to take some special star charts back to Babylon and give them to the headmaster of the astronomical sect. And, this man took on this responsibility. This young guy was like, about 18, 19 years old. And he takes on this responsibility. He has to petition the Parthian emperor himself in order to do this. So he takes the star charts and he takes them back, and he also gets inspired to study with the Magi there, which he gets permission from the emperor to do. and he becomes an apprentice. And his story is that he is the son of one of the great generals of the Parthian military. There was a battle about 40 years earlier where Marcus Crassus, the Roman, one of the Roman triumvirate, who helped put down the Spartacus rebellion. He brought an army through Egypt into Parthia to try to take some land away from the Parthian Empire, but he was defeated by a brilliant general named Serena. Well, I took this story about Serena and I made my main character his son. So his son had a lot of influence and access into the higher echelons of the Parthian Empire. And that comes out in my story later on, where he not only studies the zodiac and learns how to be a magi, but he also has all this political connection so that when the magi want to gain safe passage into Jerusalem, he has that to help them get in.
Mm. Oh,
And
I
then,
love it.
and I put a love story in there between him and a girl in Babylon, and a lot of drama there and stuff where she was commissioned to deceive him and try to get him away from the astronomical sect, but he actually wins her over to his way of thinking, and there's a lot of other stuff in there too.
So the apprentice, it's Rasan. Is that how you say his
Yeah, his
name?
name is Rasan.
Rasan. Okay, and so thinking about like everything you just said, like he gave up. It sounds like he gave up security, right, for something that was uncertain. What do we hope our readers can, absolutely maybe draw, parallels to what we're dealing with right now in life to just go after something that is uncertain?
Well, his in the book, the magi that was dying in the beginning that commissioned him had an angelic visit. And the angel told him that there was going to be a young man that was going to come and be there before he dies, and his name was Rasan, and he was going to take his place. And so he said, he's going to finish your watch. He's going to go back and he's going to study with the Magi. So there was a prophecy given to the angel by this Magi. And Rasan didn't know any of this. But he's sitting there and he's talking to this dying magi, and this magi says, you're going to go back to Babylon and you're going to become a Magi Apprentice, and da da da. And Ron says, well, what are you talking about? I'm a military officer. I want to be like my dad. But after the influence of this man and what he had to go through, he just starts to see the truth. That's what he wants to do with his life. And so it's like, you know, it's like destiny's calling him, and he has to answer. And he has to decide whether he wants to take a leap of faith or believing, or just stick to the path that's set before him. And he takes that leap, and he definitely profits from it.
Yes. Yes, right. Of course, when you apply it to today, right? I know for me personally on the Ultimate Love Letter, this is what, I'm always speaking about is the leap of faith when God is guiding you. Something I read recently is if God is calling you out on a limb, then that is the safest place to be. So,
Amen. That's
no,
great.
absolutely. And so the Magi didn't worship the stars, they followed them to
Hmm.
Jesus. So, what is the difference? Because we're told, it's either you believe in anything biblical or you believe in astrology and the stars. But here we're saying what's true. God created
Yeah.
it all.
Well, the thing is with the science of astronomy is that it's the science of watching and calculating the movements of the stars in the sky throughout the year. There are 12 signs in the zodiac, and the Earth passes through its orbit. Each one of those signs become dominant in our sky depending on what month of year it is. Well, in our understanding, those signs are, like Taurus or Gemini or some of the other Sagittarius. They are, to depict or to explain the characteristics of whoever is born under those signs. And that philosophy, that interpretation of the stars, came down to us basically a lot through the Greeks and the Chinese and other cultures, but a lot of it, we in our Western culture, comes from the Greeks, and it's a false. It's a pretended art. They try to say it's how to predict your future, how to predict what's going to happen. You can look at the signs and what's going on up there, and it shows you things. Well, the ancient Eastern interpretation and understanding of the signs of the zodiac is every single star and every sign, every conjunction and thing that happens in that star has to do with the coming and the accomplishments of the Messiah that was promised in Genesis 3:15, when God said that the seed of the woman would crush the seed of the serpent, crush his head. Well, that's exactly what's going on in the zodiac, and you see that in different spots. You see that with with this quote unquote Hercules crushing the head of the serpent. You see other things in there where the heroes there are defeating the enemy. That's all about what Christ was going to accomplish, and each one of those signs in ancient understanding was like reading the Bible, except for in the stars, and those Magi understood this, to the point that when they saw the configurations, the constellation in the constellation of Leo back in 3 BC, they saw 7 different times how fantastic conjunctions happened within the sign of Leo, basically wrapped around the planet Jupiter and the star Regulus coming into conjunction, plus some other planets and some other stars coming in. They knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that God was announcing the birth of his son by doing that. A lot of this knowledge has been lost over the years, but it's starting to be regained. I started studying this stuff, like I said, about back in 1984 when I first read this book. It's called Jesus Christ, Our Promised Seed, and it's by a man named Victor Paul Werwell, who documented, the 6 signs in the constellation of Leo, and showed how these Magi understood that was the announcement in the heavens of the birth of Jesus Christ. So I got very interested in that subject, and I started studying other sources. One of the oldest sources that I studied was this book. It's called The Gospel in the Stars, and it's written by a man named Joseph A. Seiss, and he lived about 175 years ago, and he really started digging up old sources and material that he found from all over the world on what those stars meant to those Magi, what they understood about them, how that, the different constellations had vast meanings and knowledge about what the Messiah would do, how he would come, what he would accomplish. It isn't just about his birth, it's about the whole thing. In fact, everything, that's prophesied about the Messiah in the Old Testament and in the book of Revelation, you can find basically in the zodiac. You can find it if you understand the meanings of those stars, which he started to dig up. About 50 years later, another man comes along. His name is E.W. Bullinger, and he started writing about this stuff, studying what Seiss did and taking off on it. And he, The Witness of the Stars, and he very in detail documents each sign of the zodiac and what its true biblical meaning is. And so there was a man that wrote this book back in 1978, well, the first edition, and it's The Star That Astonished the World, and it's about what we're talking about. Star, where the Magi said, "We have seen his star in the east." So this guy showed that the star basically was the planet Jupiter, which is the in biblical understanding, it's the king's planet. So, the king's planet in 3 BC comes in conjunction with a star called Regulus in the constellation of Leo. And those 2 stars get so close together. Now, Regulus is the star of royalty in the constellation of Leo. And Leo is, among other things, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, which is an allegory that goes towards Christ. It was actually, Jacob in the book of Genesis that talked about the Lion of the tribe of Judah coming out of his son Judah. And, Leo depicts the final, the end of the zodiac, the last sign in the 12 signs of the zodiac, and it shows the Messiah in his reign, being king of the universe, ruling over, restoring man back to paradise, restoring everything that was lost in Adam, and even more. And so it shows all that. And so to have these two, this planet and the star, come into conjunction in Leo really caught these guys' attention. Because here you got the planet of royalty, here you got the king's planet, which has long been associated with the Messiah, coming together in conjunction in Leo. And what better way for God to announce the birth of his son? And that was the first one. That was September 11th, 3 BC. There are 5 more that come into play. The last one was a massing of planets in the constellation of Leo. And the massing of planets were Jupiter, Venus, Mars, and Mercury, all inside of Leo. Now, for an astronomer, they understand that is just phenomenal. That you have, because, planets into the ancients were considered wandering stars, because you never could predict where these planets were going to end up in the sky, because they're so close that they're different things affect it. So they could be one place one time and another place another, and they don't have no clear pattern. Like the stars in the zodiac, like Regulus, is always going to be where it is because it's a star way out there in the vast universe. So it doesn't change positions like the planets do. So when these planets all come into one little constellation, it's a big deal. And so I told you Jupiter is the king's planet. Okay, well, Mars is the warrior, and the warrior is best depicted by Michael, the archangel. And then Mercury is the messenger, and the messenger is best depicted by the archangel Gabriel. And then Venus is the sun or the morning star, and that used to be Lucifer. But in the book of Revelation, you'll see that Jesus, the Messiah, becomes the son of the morning star. So you got the king's planet, then you got the 3 archangels represented, and Lucifer fell, so Jesus is going to take on that responsibility as well. So, and you got these 4 massings of planets in Leo. These guys are just freaking out. They're like, oh my goodness, this has never happened before. That's when they put that caravan together, and they went to Jerusalem, totally convinced that the Christ was born.
Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful. Like so beautiful. I mean, and of course, like when you think about everything that God created, of course he would use, I mean, in his vastness and his mystery, of course he would use these beautiful, stars and planets to announce something so profound. And God bless those who studied this, that were able to absolutely see that. My gosh, thank you so much, Dan, for
Well, it's
that.
just like any, you
Um,
think of God like a father, and he wanted to announce the birth of his son, and he did it in the most spectacular way he could. Some of us
spectacular.
we announce it on Facebook, we send out letters and pictures and stuff like that. Sure, we're proud of having our kids, but God, he's God, so he announced it in the stars. He told everybody, anybody who wanted to know. And the thing is the sad reality is that these magi, these Eastern magi, were the only ones that showed up looking for him. And you see, scholars have speculated that it all goes back to the prophet Daniel. The prophet Daniel, in the book of Daniel, was enslaved in Nebuchadnezzar's court. But he distinguished himself with his wisdom and his ability, and Nebuchadnezzar eventually promoted him to be chief over all the magi in the Babylonian Empire. So it's reasonable to assume that he taught these magi how to read the stars properly according to the biblical interpretation. And we believe that there was a group of these guys that stayed faithful to what he taught them. 600 years later, they're the ones that saw the signs. in the constellation of Leo, and they're the ones that showed up and said, "Hey, where is he born King of the Judeans? For we have seen his star."
I love this.
Yeah,
I
it's
love
pretty
this.
cool stuff.
Yes. And speaking of the Magi, because you taught me this, we are taught that there's the three wise men, but you're right, nowhere in the Bible does it say three, and it's you, Dan, feel that there's thousands, or that there's thousands.
Well,
You
yeah,
said
they're like definitely all over the east. Now, how many showed up at Jerusalem? I have sources I've read where it took all morning for the caravan to get through Jerusalem to get to Herod's court. So there could have been dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands. We're not sure. There's no real clear records of it, but there are some obscure sources that have speculated that. So definitely more than three. And they get the number three from gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So they're putting
sure.
one magic. You know, not I'm not faulting anybody for that. It's just,
Mm-mm.
there were a lot more. There were a lot more magi that studied the stars. There was a whole order of a religious order, a scientific and religious order that existed within all three empires down through those ages. Starting with the Babylonian Empire, then the Persian Empire, then you go down to the Parthian Empire. So it's pretty incredible.
It's very incredible. And I have one question, or another question. So, knowing how intentional our God is, um, how do we know, or why is it that I say I'm Taurus, right? Because I'm born in May. Now, as intentional as God is, if I am born, all of us who are born underneath certain, astrological signs, are we not influenced at all? You would think that that would be for not that would that couldn't be for nothing, that we wouldn't at some point, inhabit some of those qualities underneath that star, underneath that sign.
The only
But
way
if
I
God,
think
go
The only
ahead.
way I think that would happen is if you learned the qualities of that constellation and you started to emulate it. Um, it's like a book, and it's like God's word. Um, there are certain constellations to depict the evil of the adversary, Satan and his fall. So, am I to assume that if somebody was born under that sign, they're doomed to be evil? No.
Mm, good.
God wouldn't do that. That's a free will choice. And, really honestly, any biblical scholar will tell you that God's greatest rules, or one of his greatest rules, is free will.
Yes.
You are free to choose your own path. And he is not going to influence you with anything that he's created um, against your will. Okay? You decide. So you can take on those attributes if you want to, but it's not something forcing it on you. Um, the best I could tell you is, scientifically they talk about, when I did a little stint in law enforcement a few years ago, and everybody that I used to patrol with would talk about, man, whenever it's a full moon, people get temperamental, and weird things happen. People drive bad. They get temperamental. And, through the years, there have been some studies that show, like, the pressure of the full moon, or whatever it is, the gravitational pull causes to work on our nervous systems. That I can understand, you know. But to say, okay, if you were born under Taurus and you got a really bully personality. Well, one of the biggest constellations in the zodiac is Cetus, and Cetus is all about the devil. It's all about the adversary. It's all about the evil one. So if you're born when that constellation was high in the sky, you
Right.
know, so really,
I think you have really convinced me just when you said this, when you said God gives us free will to choose, and He's not going to put anything on. Like that just resonated so deeply.
hmm
Absolutely, right? So, if I'm embodying something, then I have to look at, am I being influenced by what, society is saying a Taurus, quote unquote, Taurus means? So, thank you so much, Dan. Dan, I cannot thank you enough for your book, for your writings, for your work, for getting your message out there. Please let us know, where can we find the Magi Apprentice?
Magi Apprentice is available in Amazon and Kindle, and I just recently released it on audio. I have a very wonderful English actor that read it. His name is Stephen Dalton. He does a wonderful job. It's very enjoyable, so you can get it on Audible. It's also available on Nook and in Barnes and Noble. You can get it off my website, which is danehendrickson.com. Just Dan, then E, then Hendrickson, all one word, .com. And you can find it there, and you can find a lot of stuff about some of my other books there as well.
I love it. We're gonna make sure we link all that in the show notes. Dan, it was a pleasure. Every time I've spoken to you, it's just been a real honor, and I thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it.
You as well. Have a beautiful Christmas,
You
and this
too.
is so appropriate. Appropriate. I love it.
All
Thank
right.
you so
God
much.
bless you.
God bless you as well. Have a good one.
Thanks.
Bye.